Well, here we are, the classic tench fisher's dawn. Last night I baited up. All night those tench have been hopefully eating my corn and my ground bait, and they're ready to be caught. It's a beautiful tench fisher's morning on this Shropshire Estate Lake, and there's bubbles going on in that swim. I just can't wait to get my float in there and catch a few fish. Come on. First cast of the day. There's a few tench just bubbling away in there. Sometimes it can take a little time for them to turn onto the bait, because early morning sometimes they'll just be grubbing away in that silt. This really does have to be the ultimate joy of fishing. An early summer morning, tench bubbling around the float, a beautiful lake. It really is idyllic. It's fantastic. You know, I've been all around the world fishing for most species, and yet, you know, if I had to spend 4 hours, 5 hours doing anything, it probably would be a summer's morning tench fishing. There's a liner. If you notice, I've got quite a lot of float sticking out the water. And the reason I've got that is because if you just dotted it down in a typical matchman style, what would happen? Every time those big rudder fins hit the line, the float would disappear, and more than likely, you'd be striking into the fins, sometimes under the mouth, sometimes, you know, sort of into the pecks, sometimes on the tails, which is no good at all. You're just going to pull out the fish. Yes, first chuck in, a beautiful tench. They've been feeding all night. I don't think this is a big fish, but they've been feeding there all night. And old Desi's arrived this morning just to catch one of them. Ah, this really is the ultimate kind of fishing. It really is. Look at this. Clutch screaming away. Beautiful warmth on your back. Already seen a load of birds this morning, dawn chorus. Most people are sort of still in bed. They're actually still in bed. They haven't had the breakfast yet. And look at this. I know where I'd rather be. I'd rather be here. You're not going in that reed bed. No, you're not. Come on. No, you're not. No, you're not. Look at that. Just let a bit of line so I can bring him up. He just doesn't want to come in. And that's not a big fish. Does it need to be? Look at that. He's pulling and pulling and pulling. Come on. It's time to come in the net. Oh, look at that. A beautiful, beautiful tench. Last night I put the bait in. That female fish, came onto the bait. It's probably been nestled there all night, feeding on those morsels of food. And Desi's come along with a setup, and look what he's caught. Look at that. Look at that red eye. Beautiful. Unique. Thank you, Lord, for days like this. Beautiful. bet you're thinking, Desi's only picked that peg because it's nice and flat and nice and comfortable. Well, that is one of the reasons, I have to say. But the main reason is because the swim is definitely a hot spot for Tench. And the reason is that that's the shallow end of the lake, that's the deep end of the lake. But there seems to be a definite divide here where you get about an 8-inch, 6-inch, 8-inch difference in depth here. And it comes from sort of 4.5 foot, 4 foot up to 4 foot. You get that little deviation in the bottom, and that's all you need to make a hot spot. Those fish tend to be sort of, so I'm just having a take as I'm talking. So those fish are coming around and they seem to be just on the edge. There is fish over the other side in the shallows. There's fish both sides, but what there is, it seems to be more fish just coming up to that little indentation in the bottom, and they're just working along there. And that's where they tend to be feeding, sort of, most of all. They seem to almost be like a bowl. You know, they're coming along, they go into that ridge, working along the ridge and coming back round. I can see them out in the water, I can see them back here, but they don't seem to be going just the odd one, but they just seem to be going along that ridge, which is why it's the perfect swim. You've got reeds, you've got cover, you've got a feature. Hey, it don't get any better. And already I've proved that, you know, sort of, I've got the right spot. I'm into fish straight away. From the first cast I'm into fish. You'll have little spells where all of a sudden they're bubbling and you can't get a take. They just won't take the float down. Don't just start changing baits and changing rigs and changing shots, etc. Believe me, they will come round to eating again. It's just, you know, you're not going to catch fish every minute. Just be patient, just wait your time, and all of a sudden, down will go the float again, and you're into another fish. All the time, little indications on the float. Probably the most exciting one is when the bubble travels up the line and sort of busts right on the float. There we go, straight under. And we've got one on. There we go. Woohoo! Look at that go. Look at that go. You see the bubbles? Look at the bubbles in the swim now. That's great with tench fishing. That fish is actually thrashed through the peg. Any other fish, you think, oh God, that's going to scare the fish. But with tench, it almost seems to turn them on, because I suppose with the fish going through the swim, he's disturbing the bottom and disturbing all food particles, which is fantastic. You know, those tench are coming back into the swim, you know, getting the new food that's been uncovered. Does it get any better than this? Does it get any better? Look at that. I think we're going to have a bag full today. But as I said, I'll say it again, you know, you've rolled up, chucked the float in. My God, it must be an easy lake. Well, there's a lot of lakes around the country, but that you could do this. Not probably quite as good as this, because this lake, owned by Kimber Freeliners, is a very, very, very special lake. Oh. My God. That's a decent fish. I had to bring the net in then, because I was going to get caught in the net. This is a lovely fish. Ready now. Come on, you're ready now, my old son. Look at that. Beautiful, deep-bodied female. Thank you very much. That's beautiful. Look at that. Wow. Getting slightly bigger the fish are now. Bigger fish will move in, take command of the swim. Very often, if the tench aren't in, you'll catch rudd and you'll catch roach and you'll catch other fish. But as soon as these big girls come in, there ain't nothing eating the corn except for the tench. And then very often at 10, 11, 12 o'clock in the morning after you've had 5 hours of this, suddenly you'll start catching rudd and roach, and that virtually guarantees that's the end of the sport for the morning. They'll probably start feeding again then late evening, but the best of the fishing's gone. Let's get this back in the keep net. We're catching lots of fish now, but let's just look at the rig. It is really, really, really simple. In fact, it's quite crude, but it needs to be crude in that what I've explained about the float sticking out for the bites. You know, you don't need to be sensitive in that you've got 1/8 of an inch showing out the top. All I've got is a waggler, which always say, use a waggler or any float that's heavier than what you actually need. There's nothing worse struggling to cast or struggling to hold out in the flow or in the drift with a very light float. A light float doesn't make it more sensitive. So that's about a 3AA waggler, straight peacock waggler. And all I've done is I've come down the lot on a button, almost button type arrangements with a shot. And what I've done at the bottom, this is the most important part, because there's very little wind at the moment and very little drift. What I've got is I've got a number 6 down on the bottom, about 6 inches away. And what I'll actually do is if it starts to get very windy and the drift comes on, what I'll do is I'll put another one there 6 inches and put the depth up so that one shot, instead of one shot lying on the bottom, there's 2 shots lying on the bottom. And if it gets really, really bad, I'll even put another 6 inches on the depth and put another shot on there. So there's 3 shots lying on the bottom. May sound crude, but at least it's going to catch fish. At least it's holding in the area. There's nothing worse than a float going right through the peg as fast as the wind. You're not going to get a take on that. You're going to pick up snags and you're not going to get a fish. It's not very natural. A piece of sweet corn drifting along the bottom at 5 knots per hour. The bait, good old sweet corn. I think it was Fred J. Taylor that originally come up with the idea that the Americans were using this as a bait for all kinds of species, and since that day I've caught a lot of fish, various species on this bait. Size 12 hook, a strong hook, eyed hook, 2 pieces of sweet corn onto the hook, barb showing. There you go. Does it get any simpler than that? Chuck it out into the swim, bingo. What I'll do very often is, if you look at the float, what I'll do is I'll sink it, just bump, bump like that, and just twitch it along the bottom. And what that does is the tench down there, if there's a couple of tench competing, if you just move that corn, it might just get another tench to do that. I missed the bite, but did you see that? Not long after I twitched it, I get the take. And that's very common, that is, because, you know, a couple of tench have owned in onto a bait. Shall I, shan't I? As soon as it moves, one's got to make the decision, shall I have it? Or the other one will. You know, sometimes you're having lots of bubbles, and that can mean they've got the heads down in the silt, they're blowing, they're on natural feed, they're not actually on yours. And a lot of the time, I think they pick up your sweet corn, not as the sweet corn, they're picking up things on the bottom, they're sucking in the bottom, and they've actually sucked your bait in. They haven't necessarily come down and took your bait. That's why sometimes you have to wait so long for a take, because they're not actually taking the corn. Yep, got one. Did you see that again? Just a movement, slight movement, and bingo. I'm in. That makes such a difference. I learned that when I was gudgeon fishing, when I was a kid. You know, to get a take, you know, just give it a little twitch, and it can make all the difference in getting a take. And tench fight like hell. Look at that. I mean, for a fish that's probably 3 or 4 pound, you know, what can you expect any more than that? Look at that, clutch is paying out. If I hadn't got the clutch set like that, it would pull the hook out. Look at that. Hoo-hoo-hoo, Desi boy. Look at that. It's actually twice as far now as when I hooked it, as when I first hooked it. But a constant clutch on it is better than backwinding. Learn to play on the clutch, because be in no doubt, if you backwind a fish, when you eventually hook in big fish, you can't backwind. You get a massive fish, whether it be a sea fish, whether it be a monstrous carp, 75, 80 pound abroad or whatever, you cannot keep up with it on a backwind. You will lose that fish. You'll wrap your knuckles and you'll lose the fish. Learn to play on a clutch. That constant pressure, look, is tiring the fish out. And it's tiring me out. Look at that, an estate lake tench, all of 6 pounds, a beautiful, beautiful fish. Oh, yes, they do grow up to 14, 15 pounds in gravel pits, and tremendous fish they are too. And I'd never decry that kind of fishing because I enjoy it myself. But there's something about a float. There's something about being in an estate lake, shallow water, bubbling tench, a shoal in front of you, with beautiful bonny tench like this, fighting for 5 minutes. Fabulous fishing. I can't say it enough that, you know, it's so easy to say, you know, you've got a fabulous lake. Yes, I've got a fabulous lake. It's full of fish. But without sounding big-headed, and I don't want to sound big-headed, you know, it's funny that quite a lot of the swims I fish are full of fish. You know, it can't keep being luck. You know, the reason is because I do the preparation. I put the time in, you know, and there they are. You know, I have got a swim full of fish, but I've done all the preparation. I've done the right swim selection. The rest is fairly easy. You know, most people can cast in, most people can play a fish, but are you fishing a swim full of fish? That's what you've got to make sure you're doing. To be honest, my swim is full of fish, as the clutch is showing. Look at that. Wow. Is that the nicest sound in fishing? The clutch singing as a big fish powers away from you. And again, and again, and again. Woohoo! Oh. Come on, girl. There we go. Just about everything perfect. Came down last night, put the bait in, picked the right swim, came back early this morning, just as the dawn chorus had finished. Put the rig in, and look what I've been catching, one after another. I'm a very, very lucky man. But you make your own luck in fishing, and we've made our own luck this time. What a great session.